Electric vehicles are the future, at least that's the general consensus. While countries the world over have started to fully embrace electric vehicles, India's EV juggernaut has been slowly but surely gathering steam. And at the forefront of it all, as one of the flag bearers, is Tata Motors, which has had the Nexon EV on sale in India for over a year. And being the most affordable one on sale, or at least it was the most affordable one, it was also the best selling. But now, the company has added another name to the list in the form of the Tigor EV. The headline here is that this is now the most affordable electric vehicle on sale in India with a very practical range of 306 kilometers, which is what Tata claims. Before we get to the full story though, do remember to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon so that you get notified every time we go live with a new video on AutoToday. To differentiate the Tigor EV from its fossil fuel sipping siblings, Tata has given it a few exterior touches. Starting with this paint scheme, which is specific to the electric version of the Tigor, which is further accentuated by those blue highlights that you see around the grille, and those blue highlights also trickle down to the interiors, but we'll get to that in a bit. Other key noticeable changes are that grille, since this is an electric vehicle, so the radiator is not required, so it's closed off and tells you exactly that this is an electric vehicle. Those wheels you see, they might look like alloy wheels with those blue highlights, but they're actually plastic wheel covers. The rim within is a steel rim which is shaped to match those wheel covers. But yeah, they still look good enough, and to most people they will appear like alloy wheels. Other changes include just a smattering of EV badges all around. Stepping inside the Tigor EV, the blue highlights that you saw on the outside have made their way inside as well. You get them around the aircon vents, instrument console and other places. And speaking of the instrument console, it's a digital setup. Right in the middle you get a screen with your speed, range, power consumption displays, and on the left is your the throttle input, the degree of throttle input, which obviously the higher it is, the more power will be consumed, obviously. On the right is your battery status. Instead of a fuel gauge, you get that battery status. And just under that is your regen display, which basically tells you the extent of regenerative braking that's happening every time, say, you lift off or you apply the brakes. Rear seat space is the same as the regular petrol Tigor, and there are no changes on that front. Despite the battery being laid out across the floor, it seems to me that the space has remained exactly the same. Once again, just to refresh your memories, this seat is adjusted to my driving position and my height is 5'8" for reference. And as you can see, I have plenty of leg room under the seat to stretch out my legs, and I have ample knee room as well. Under thigh support is quite okay for a person my height, but taller individuals might find it a little lacking. Headroom again is pretty good, and if you're above 6 foot tall, then it might your head might be a little too close to the roof for comfort, but for an average size individual like me, the rear seat space is pretty ample in the Tata Tigor. In terms of amenities, if you're sitting in the back, there isn't really much to speak of apart from this cup holder, cup holders in the armrest, rubberized lining, so you know they hold on to your bottle of water or your can of soft drinks pretty well. And there is a cup holder here as well, but there are no rear AC vents, and you also don't get any pockets behind the front seats. And aside from these specific touches, everything else within the cabin is essentially the same as the Tigor. You get the same amount of space, you get a similar steering wheel, same touchscreen system with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support. Automatic climate control as well is present. The other crucial difference is, instead of a gear selector, you get this rotary dial, very similar to what we've already seen in the Nexon EV, which is pretty straightforward to use. You get reverse, neutral, drive, and S, which is sport mode. The seats have been revised as well to reflect the Tigor's electric nature, with the tri-arrow motif and again those blue highlights running through them to let you know that this is different from your petrol powered sibling. And in the boot, I did mention that space essentially is the same as the Tigor EV, but there is a small difference. Since the battery pack is located along the floor of the vehicle, there is no space. The traditional space for the spare wheel has been eaten up, so now the spare wheel is placed inside the boot. It's been done neatly. It's pushed to one side, but it does slightly eat up into the overall boot capacity. Tigor EV has a peak power output of around 75 bhp and a peak torque output of 170 Newton meters. And you get two driving modes to choose from. There is your standard drive mode, and then there is S, which is Sport. What it does is gives you access to the full quota of torque and power, which basically means every time you step on the throttle, the car goes really quickly. But yeah, exciting. But what it will do is have a very negative impact on your overall range. Every time you hit the throttle hard, range drops, and that's another thing with electric vehicles. You have to be careful about that. But let's be honest and let's be responsible rather. Don't do that in normal city conditions. Of course, you can use it for executing quick overtaking maneuvers, but yeah, don't keep flooring the throttle because you will run out of charge rather quickly. But drive it with a light foot, or just normally how you normally drive your car in city conditions within the speed limits, and you will be fine. You'll get a decent amount of range. Performance will still be way better than a similarly priced petrol or diesel powered vehicle, and still the Tigor EV will be exciting enough to drive. There is absolutely no engine noise, but on the downside you do hear more of the road. Tire noise has increased, and you do hear more of it at speeds lower in relation to what you would hear. You know, a tire noise or road noise filtering into the cabin is usually at a higher speed in case of petrol or diesel vehicles, but in this case it does filter in at slightly lower speeds. But aside from that, the one really good aspect about EVs has always been the refinement levels. I have driven the Tigor in the past, and while I loved most of the car, I did have a slight issue with the refinement levels overall, even the petrol powered one. In this case, with an electric motor, all those worries and cons are put to rest, because it feels so smooth, so refined, so seamless in its power delivery, and that's one of the strongest selling points of electric vehicles in general. Aside from just flooring the throttle and leaving every other standard ICE vehicle in your wake, excitement is further accentuated by a very nicely balanced ride and handling setup. It's not sporty in that sense, but it still is quite exciting enough for the segment, I would say, especially because with the battery, which is the heaviest component of the vehicle, spread across the floor, the center of gravity is lowered, so just the Tigor EV is just that much more dynamically accomplished. And the steering is nice and light at city speeds. It's got decent amount of weight. When it comes to the suspension setup though, that inherent firmness which is associated with electric vehicles in general is present, but it's not uncomfortable at all. In fact, the Tigor EV has been doing, like, we've been driving it in the city and slightly less than perfect roads and over speed breakers like these. It's done pretty well. It's not uncomfortable, it's not bone jarring or anything of that sort, and it isn't too soft either that it wallows or moves about too much at triple digit speeds. With a 26 kWh lithium-ion battery pack, Tata claims that as per ARAI testing standards, the Tigor EV can do 306 km on a single charge. Realistically though, based on the few hours we spent driving the car within the city, users are likely to achieve a range of around 180 to 200 km on a single charge. And that, for me, considering the price point and the fact that an average person, your daily office runs would be maybe about 30 to 40 kilometers a day, that seems pretty ample for a week's worth of running easily. At least 5 days, Monday to Friday, you'll be sorted for your office to home and back to office runs. You will have to have a 15 amp socket through which you can charge the car, and if you're using that, then Tata is claiming a charging time of 8 hours 30 minutes, somewhere around that. even if you assume 9 to 10 hours, that's basically an overnight charge. So what that means is by the time you plug in, and realistically speaking, you're going to be plugging it in by the time the battery drops to maybe 20% or 15%. For a full charge, that's it. An overnight charge should be good enough, and you can run the car an entire week almost. So that makes it actually pretty usable in the city. The only hitch is, and of course that it's not necessarily something that's wrong with electric cars in general, it's highway driving, outstation driving. You cannot really take it out on the weekends just yet, because charging infrastructure along the highways is still lacking. Some parts of the country it is coming up, and coming up quite fast, but right now most parts of the country it is still lacking. So Tigor EV, like any other electric vehicle, is very well suited as a second car. So you can have your primary vehicle which can do everything, your petrol or diesel powered vehicle, whatever it is, or even a hybrid if you can get a hold of one in India. But the Tigor EV can be your secondary car, your daily driver for city conditions. But again, I pointed out one problem, which is the fact that you cannot really take it on outstation trips. The second issue is the price. It is the most affordable electric vehicle in India, no doubt, and it is very cheap to run compared to a diesel or petrol vehicle. But you will still need a fair few years to recover the cost, the extra cost that you pay upfront, because for a similar amount of money you can obviously get a much bigger vehicle, a vehicle with more space, more features. And again, I come back to the same point again. If it's going to be a primary vehicle, you are very unlikely to go in for an electric one. But if you are going to use it as your secondary vehicle just for your city run, just in the urban environment, then the Tigor EV makes a lot of sense, and I think makes a strong case for the switch to EVs.